to data landing zone should be mapped to my marketing campaign, which is cool. Then the channel should be mapped to my channel field, of course not channel type, and then channel type to channel type, just like this. In this way you can just create a mapping from whatever schema you have in your data that you bring into AEP. You don't need to have it fully figured out. You don't need to use matching column names and all that. Of course it helps you a little bit in the mapping process to do it, because then this AI feature that they have here will be able to help you map those fields a little bit better. But in theory, you don't need to do that at all. You can just do that once you bring your data into AEP and just use data landing zone to do a quick and easy upload. For Azure Cloud Storage, there's also a desktop application. So if you want to actually bring data into your data landing zone, you can just use that desktop application. It works a little bit like FileZilla for FTP servers. You can just use a file on your desktop, just drag and drop it into the cloud storage, and then you just have it there. And then you can just use it in AEP for customer journey analytics, real-time CDP, whatever might be interesting to you. Okay, so now we assume we have data in Experience Platform because we have created our schema, we have used a connector to a cloud. We can also use Web SDK for that, but I don't know how much time we actually have to go into that. If we have some left in the end, I'm going to cover it. But I want to get through with the actual tool stuff. So once we have the data in Experience Platform, we now need to take it out of Experience Platform again because we want to bring it into CJA. And as I said, I guess we had the question in the middle right there. If you ask me, CJA pretty much runs adjacent to AEP. It's pretty much next to AEP, but not fully on AEP, because you need to actually bring data from AEP into CJA. It's not just there. So let's actually go into Customer Journey Analytics. Now 1 hour and 15 minutes into the training. So Customer Journey Analytics, if you just open it, pretty much looks like your Adobe Analytics, because the first thing you always see is Analysis Workspace, and it's Analysis Workspace. So Analysis Workspace pretty much works in exactly the same way, but we have one very, very exciting feature, which I'm going to show you right now, because for the very first time in Adobe Analytics and Customer Journey Analytics, we're able to sort tables alphabetically. So right now in Adobe Analytics, there is no way to do what I'm just casually doing right here, to just sort a table by the actual alphabetical value. I'm sure, Patrick, Marcus, you're just as excited as I am about alphabetical sorting in tables, because my God, this has taken a long time. Let me actually, there's my applause button. Let me actually bring that in, because my God.
I mean, you have an applause button for yourself. Okay.
That was more for Adobe, and I don't have a slow clap, sarcastic applause for that, which would be appropriate as well. But yeah.
Yeah, but I think we can all agree on that the sorting function is very important for web analytics tool, right?
Well, yeah, that especially the alphabet has some significance to people, I would say. So that's very much something I can appreciate. Yeah. So let's actually see how we get data from Experience Platform into Customer Journey Analytics, and that happens in what they call a connection. And a connection is pretty much what a report suite is in Adobe Analytics, because A, it is what holds your data, it is what is actually ingesting your data, and B, it is also what you're paying for. So in Customer Journey Analytics, you pay for a certain amount of rows of data that you can bring into the tool, and the way that there are, like Adobe is evaluating if you're actually over your limit or in your limit, is through looking at your connections. So what you do to bring data from AEP into Customer Journey Analytics is, if I just call this CJA demo like this so I can find it easily, is actually say, this looks very, very empty, is first you give it a name and a description if you like to. You can also tag it. But then you just start adding data sets. And what you will see is those are the data sets that we have within AEP, within Experience Platform, that follow the schema that you have just defined. What you can do in here is you can just select as many data sets as you like. So for example, if you want to bring this dataset and this dataset into customer journey analytics, you can just do that. And this is also super important when you want to move from Adobe Analytics to customer journey analytics, because there's always this temptation to only say, we only want to have one big data set that contains all the data that will go into customer journey analytics, but there's no need to do that. So you can make your life significantly easier by just saying, all right, this data set contains all of my legacy Adobe Analytics data that might have been nicely formatted already, that might come from my cloud, like cloud destination, whatever it is. And then to the side of that, you have your web data and you might have your app data. Those don't need to be in the same data set. That's super important because they don't need to be in the same data set for CJA, and they also don't need to be in the same data set for RTCDP. There's no need to bring them into the same data set, and you can make your life significantly easier by keeping things a little bit separate and just deciding from time to time what you actually want to bring in there. So once you then say next, what you need to do for each and every dataset is to say, all right, for this dataset, what is my person ID? So in this case, I'm using an identity map field, and this is pretty much what I was saying before. So as long as you have your person ID, as long as you have your timestamp, you can bring it into customer journey analytics. It doesn't matter if it's in some weird, format like I've just shown you before. So let's go back to this weird schema that I've created here for testing. So even if it's just in this weird format with nothing really in it, you can just bring it into CJA as an event data set. You can just do that by saying, all right, this is where my person ID is, this is where my timestamp is. It also forces you to say which type of data it is. Like, this doesn't really have any implications, but you can do that. And then you just do that for each and every field. And depending on which type of data set it is, you can say, all right, this is my event data. So this is saying actually event data set. So this contains like all the interactions on your website, in your call center, and all of that. What you can also bring in there is what they call lookup data sets. And lookup data sets are classifications in old Adobe Analytics speech. So they just describe whatever it is. So for classifications, you of course say, all right, I want to map my name, for example, with my segment ID. I don't know, some random fields in this example. But this is basically how you create classifications in Customer Journey Analytics, because you just say, all right, from my event dataset, which of my fields should match whatever other field in my lookup dataset. You can also do the same with profile datasets, which are pretty much just customer attributes from the old Adobe Analytics world. So it's like classifications, but for people. So in there you can also say, what is my person ID? And then you can say which type of data it is. And this will basically just stitch all of your data together, because all of the reporting that happens in Customer Journey Analytics happens in real time with whatever data you have in there. So in Adobe Analytics, you don't just have the option to, let's say that I've been to your website last week and you have some call center data from me for like 2 weeks ago. Because of the visitor profile and those restrictions in Adobe Analytics, you cannot simply bring that in, because it messes up Adobe Analytics and everything that you hold dearly. So you can't just bring that data in. Customer Journey Analytics does not care about that. So you can just bring the data in out of order. You can do it from many different data sets. It will all stitch it together, align it into one nice user journey for each and every person in your data set. So this is, of course, super exciting if you have more than one data set, if you have like more than one data source. If you want to bring all of your data together, this is super cool. So what you can also say as soon as you bring a data set in here is, if you want to bring in new data, you can say that you want to also import any data that comes in after it's been activated. And if you want to bring in historical data, you can also do that. You don't need to. You can select this per dataset and be like, yeah, as I've been saying before, if you have a dataset for all your historical data, you just don't enable the new data field. If you have a dataset for all of your new data, you don't need to enable the other field. So this is super cool, and this is how you bring all of that together. And once you have all of your all of your data defined, you have like all of your event data sets, your lookups, your person data sets all selected, you can then go into I'm not sure if I should say the most exciting part, because it is super exciting what you're going to see here, but it's also like everything about customer journey analytics is just super cool. So for example, what we're now going to do is create something that is required to analyze your data. In Adobe Analytics, you can just, once you create a report suite, you can just use it. You don't need to create any virtual report suites. In Customer Journey Analytics, you always need to create what is called a data view. And the data view pretty much is what a virtual report suite is for Customer Journey Analytics, but it's just turned up to 11. Like, there's so many things you can do in here, so many exciting features. And I'm just going to like scrape the top of it because it is really cool what you can do here. So you can see already on the very first page of my data view configuration, I can configure things that in Adobe Analytics I can only configure for the whole report suite. So for example, I know there's some weird people in the world, some weird people who want to have their week starts on Sunday. Like, it's just wrong for me. I don't know why people would want that, but some people, especially in the US, are like, yep, this is the right way to do things. And here for each and every data view, so in the old speak, for each and every virtual report suite, you can just select a different start of the week, which is super cool because it's all adapted in real time. And even if you change it in the future, even if you're like, yeah, like I want to go with like the cool US people and start my weeks on Sunday today, maybe next week you're like, oh, that was actually stupid, I want to start it on Monday. You can just do that. You can just change it as you go, retroactively. All of your data will just be realigned to that new start of the week, and super cool. You can even do weird things like start your year on like different months of the year, because maybe you have a weird financial calendar, maybe your business year starts in May or whatever. Maybe you have some good reasons to do that. So yeah, all of that can happen in real time per data view, and you can just change it on the fly, which is amazing. Like, that's something where Adobe Analytics would just be like, nah, we will not let you do that ever. And yeah, like, you can change some settings, but especially per virtual reports, this is super cool. And I haven't even gotten to the real cool part yet, which is the component settings. So in Adobe Analytics, you pretty much are locked in. If you track something as an event, it's going to be a number. If you track something as an evar, it's going to be a string, so a text value. Now, for example, if I go into my actual event data here, and I go into whatever I have here. So for example, let's say I have my page views. So once I start dragging and dropping this from the left, you can see, all right, I can drag this to my metrics. I can just use a page view as a page view like I would do in Adobe Analytics, but I can also drag this into my dimensions here. So I can also edit here and be like, hey, I want to treat this numerical value that I dragged as a number in the front end, but I want to do it as a string value in Customer Journey Analytics. So once I scroll down here a little bit, you can then do things like very exciting stuff. You can say you want to include or exclude certain values from your data. So for example, you want to, like, if you have some weird tracking issues in the front end, you want to exclude all of your data where like your page views is greater than 100, because maybe you have some weird hits in the front end because the developer messed something up. They missed like a decimal place, and now you're tracking, like, with every page view you're tracking 100 page views. You can just be like, hey, I just want to not have this in my data. You can just on the fly retroactively exclude it like this, which is super cool. What you can also do is bucketing. So if you want to say, well, it's cool that my users can look at like each and every value for like my order value, for example, in a table, but I want to give them something like buckets. So I want to say, all right, let's add a few here. So I want to have a bucket for people who have less than 10 in their value, like for example, your order metric, your purchase metric. We want to have only orders with like a certain value. So you can say if the revenue is less than 10, or like between 10 and 20, or between 20 and 30, or above 30, you want to have buckets that just show this value in a nice table. You can just do that. And again, it's retroactive. Like, even if you just start tracking values today, you can just go in here tomorrow and be like, hey, I actually wanted to have this nice feature. I just wanted to have that. And then you can bring it in. And also, because we had a question about that before, you can just set your allocation and your attribution for that. So for example, in here you can set like there's some classical things in here, like for example, you can say like with an EVA today, you would say this EVA should be valid for the whole visit, or like for 30 days or whatever you want. So in here you can also say the same thing. So you can say this dimension should be valid for the whole session, or maybe just a certain number of minutes, or like even days. So if you want to have a field that is valid for 30 days after it's been set, you can just do that on the fly right now. And because we had the question before, if you want to do that, you can also use your, sorry, I closed it too early. You can also have things like your binding dimension in here. And binding dimensions in Customer Journey Analytics are pretty much what your merchandise EVAs are in Adobe Analytics, for example. So if you want to bind this, whenever the event type is set, you can just say, all right, whenever there's a value in both dimensions and this one is set, you want to bind it. And this is basically what a merchandise EVA is doing in good old Adobe Analytics. So this is super cool because, again, it's on the fly. You don't need to do it up front. You can change it each and every time you go in here. And what you can also do is, if you want to have this in more than one version, you can just drag and drop this multiple times in here. It will then say, hey, you already have this. Are you sure you want to add it a second time? But you can just add it as many times as you like. And you always get this pop-up box, which is a little bit annoying. But if you want to have your page views metric 3 times in here, because you want to have it with like different allocations, with like different expirations and all that, you can. You can just rename it to then also give it a different name, which is super cool. And also in your set persistence, you can also do things like your entry page, your exit page, which would be the first known and the last known value. So being able to do this for every type of dimension, be it like a metric, a text value, whatever it might be, and just have it on the fly and being able to, yeah, I want to do something with this in the future, you can just do it, which is exciting, which is really exciting. So this is now me being just like exploratory and just dragging a number value into my dimensions. When I bring a string value in here, no, I have this already, and actually treat it as a string, like my page name here, I get a couple of more settings here, because like with strings, you can do more things or different things than with numbers. So for example, you can say, I want only a certain part of this string value. What that means is, so for example, if you want to have like a certain number of characters from the left of the string or from the right of the string, you can just say, all right, give me every character in the string from position 10 to the end. You can just do that retroactively, non-destructively, on the fly as you're working with the data. I mean, it's mind-blowing, like this type of thing, to be able to just do it, like as you have already collected your data, and being able to like pull things apart again. Like if you have some delimiters in here, you can also use that. Like to me, that is just mind-blowing. Like people are a little bit quiet in chat, so if you also find this exciting, then let me know, because I want to actually validate if I'm the only one who finds this exciting, if there are more people than like me. Because you can also do things like, as I said, you can say, I want to use like my comma as a delimiter, for example, for a list, and I want to use like the third item of that list. You can just do that. You can not just bring it in. If you have a URL, you can just pull apart all the parts of that URL. Like you can just like retroactively create something for a certain query string value. So if you want to bring in your UTM source afterwards, you only have the URL right now, and you just want to take that apart retroactively, you can. Like it's super easy, super neat to do. So at least Barry is with me. That's very reassuring. And yeah, you can just do all of those amazing things. So that's already super cool, but it gets more super cool because you can then also create something that is called a derived field. And if you have been following my blog, I never actually set the URL or anything, so it's fullstackanalyst.io. So on that blog, like the last couple of blog posts, I've just been talking about derived fields because they are so amazing. And with derived fields, you can then go into even further greatness of like working with your data. So let's go in here, because you might think, let's skip the tutorial. You might think, all right, this is super cool, but like there's more complex things. Like, for example, as I've been saying, your marketing channel. So how on earth, with those basic settings, am I going to create or recreate my marketing channels? The answer to that is very simple, because, thank you, Patrick, because you're going to do that with derived fields. And derived fields are basically a number of rules and functions that you can run on your data as the data is being processed and queried. So let's just use a function template here, because Adobe has already provided us with a template for marketing channels in this case. And what you can see here is a set of rules that Adobe has come up with to do some things like a marketing channel. So in here I can now say I want to use my URL field, I want to use my CID value as my campaign parameter, and I want to use another field. I'm just picking some random fields here. I want to use as my, and just by going this, alright, if my referring domain contains any of the terms like Google, Bing, Yahoo and all that, and if my query parameter is set, then I'm going to identify this as paid search. So this is basically my paid search detection in this list of search engines. Adobe Analytics, or Customer Journey Analytics rather, sorry, is now going to just go through this list and be like, hey, is this condition true for this event? And then just going to pull in, yeah, this has been a paid search hit. In a similar way, for example, if they come from any of those, what do you say, domains, any of those referrers, and they are not paid search because we've done that in the beginning, then it's natural search. So just by going through this list of conditions and being like, yeah, if this is true and this is true, then set this value. This is how you can now build your marketing channels. There's still some work to do in terms of like expiration and override settings and all that. So Adobe is not quite there, I would say, but it's very, very powerful already. So what you can also do is, if I just get rid of all of this and start over, if I actually go out of this again, what we can do, which is just a super cool, I don't want to call it a hack because it's just built-in functionality, but within any workspace, you can just go into your data view setting and just click on this little pen icon here and just go like this, which is super cool. Because in this I already have created some cool derived fields that I want to show you. So like for derived fields, you also have functions like you can see here your previous value. So for example, if you want to bring in your previous values from your session, you can just do it like this. And finally, we now have a native way to bring in things like your previous page or your next page. And not just for one page, but also you can say how far you want to go back. And there's, I think, no limit to how far you can go back. And this way, once we go in here, we can now say, all right, I have my page name, which is cool, but I also have my previous page name. So for example, on the payment page, how have people come to the payment page? All right, from the checkout page, which makes sense. And because you can also then concatenate those values together, you can also say something like your page journey, how I've been calling it. So for example, on your payment page, you can also see how people have come to that page. So let me actually show you how I built this very, very cool derived field. So if I go in here and I take my page journey, then I can see here I have just used derived fields to pull in the very first page name of my session. So this is actually my very first page, my entry page. And I'm concatenating that with the very last page of my session. And you can also see I'm putting some delimiters in here. There's a full blog post on the blog if you want to build this for yourself. And just by using it, I can now say, all right, how many people do I have in my sessions who started on a certain page and then ended up on another page? And like, what were those journeys? It's super cool. It's super flexible because, again, it's all non-destructive on the fly. You can just do it. Like, it's super cool, and Adobe is going to add more and more functionality to the derived field. So this is just like them basically going through my wish list from like 4 years ago, where I've been wishing for all of those things to exist, and now they're actually building it, which is super exciting. And just do it like this. So this is super neat. What you can also do, which is super cool in your derived fields, is you can also use, of course, numerical values. So for example, if your UX team wants to know, like, of all the people who go through our like e-commerce shop, like all our e-commerce pages, like what is the most and least priced item that they see on those pages. And with this, you can now say, all right, please give me the minimum price of each and every session, or like give me the maximum price, or like any other field, and summarize my whole session by like your minimum, your maximum, your mean, and all that, which is super, super neat and like super cool because you can just do it. And again, next and previous, super cool, I've shown that already. Also the same thing with, for example, string values. So for example, if I take my page name here again, sure, I can just go in here and be like, yeah, I want to see how many different pages my users, my visitors have seen during their session. You can just create a derived field for that and then have this like super helpful field available in segmentation, in calculated metrics, everywhere where you might want to use it, because there is technically no difference between a kind of real field that you tracked from the front end, like this one, and your derived field. So if you want to build a segment based on this, or like a calculated metric, you can just do that. And this is like one way where I'm like, yeah, if you go like in here and you want to have like your lowest product price in here, this is now a way, for me at least, to bring calculated metrics into segments, which in Adobe Analytics is something we've been wishing for since the beginning pretty much. So if you have a way to define your metric through a derived field, or like through any of those transformations, you can now use it in segments, use it in like further downstream calculated metrics as well. You can just do everything you might want on that, and that, I think, is super, super cool. Again, let me know in the chat if you're both still awake and still there, and you're also excited for this. So, because I have a feeling that we might run out of time if we don't start with it now, do we have any further questions, Patrick and Marcus?
Yes, we have. So,
it's good.
What's your CJA feature list? More generic question, actually.
Feature wish list.
Feature wish list. Sorry.
Well, no need to be sorry for that. So let me actually go to this blog that we might have, because if you're talking to Adobe, you might want to mention this blog post, because here I have a blog post that's titled, "Should you buy Adobe Analytics or Customer Journey Analytics today?" And in here, I keep this updated as often as I get to it. And in here, like, I give my general recommendation of, if you're a new customer, just go for CJA these days. But also in here, I have my wish list and like previous like unique features. And there are things right now that are not like present, where I was like very surprised to not find them. Like, for example, in Workspace, in Adobe Analytics, you have templates. You have a way for your business users to start with something rather than just a empty Workspace project. In Customer Journey Analytics, they've just not done that for reasons I will never understand. And this, for me, is like one of my biggest items, because I want this thing to be usable and approachable for business users. So this is very high on my list. Same with like dimension and metric templates. So for example, my as I was saying, my referrer types, my marketing channels, like all of those like paid search detection dimensions, I want Adobe to provide us with those, because it would just be another template for derived fields, basically. And yeah, that would be super cool to have like within that, which is like very high on my wish list. Same thing with pathing, for example. We didn't actually go into that. Some data application functions are already in there. What I just want to quickly mention as well, we won't have time for that to cover in high detail, but one way that you can also use to process your data if you want to is using query service, because in Experience Platform, as we've mentioned in the beginning, there's a way to just run SQL commands on your data and output that into a new data set. So what I've done, for example, in, let's actually go through some commands in here, is do things like, of course, back then I didn't have it, so I needed to do things like my entry and exit page by hand, which was painful, but it worked. But in here, I've also done things like your full path report, where you just have like all the page names of your session in one string in your dimension. You can do that in query service, for example. So this is something where you want to like still use query service today. And I would love if we don't need to do that in the future, because I mean, I can do SQL if I have to. Like, I think this blog post is proof to that. Like, even if it's ugly and probably inefficient or whatever, like I can get the job done. On the other hand, I don't want to. Like, I hate it, and yeah, I don't want to do it in the future. So, please, Adobe, bring that into Customer Journey Analytics as well. There's probably more items on that list, but yeah. Again, if you want to, I will just post that post to the chat. So people, when they talk to Adobe, can just mention that post, and we have a like aggregated and a coordinated wish list, because yeah, many things to wish for.
Perfect. So yeah, perfect answer. Basically, you have the question, and then you have the blog post, which is named the same as the question.
That's like probably that's like actually the biggest reason for me to blog about anything, because then I just write it once. I can always link people to there, and I also remember it myself, because like I wouldn't be able to just remember all this SQL or like replicate it time and time again. So I just written it down for everyone, and this is actually why I'm blogging it all, because I just want to remember and other people can use it as well. Sorry, random tangent.
All right, so let me check. But we didn't cover the common key stuff here, right?
I think we did.
We did?
No, we didn't.
When bringing in data set to the CJA, should they have a common key, or can it be separated data sources? I mean, I think we already covered that one. Of course, it can be separate data sources, but if you want to connect them, you need a common key.
Exactly.
Otherwise, it won't work.
Exactly. So, if your goal is to just have it all in one data view, then you can just bring it all in there. People don't have connected journeys. But yeah, that's like the hard part, and like the part about device graphing that we covered a while back. So if you want it to be connected, you need to find a common identifier, which in the future can be the device graph, which is going to be exciting.
Then next question, how does CJA help with multi-touch attribution?
Ooh, pretty good question. So when I go back into the actual data view editor here, the cool thing is, once we, for example, let's just take any dimension here. So in the settings for any dimension, or also any metric, and also real time within workspace, you can just set your attribution model on the fly. So in here you have like so many different, let me actually go here, like so many different attribution models to be like, yeah, I want to see the first value, the last value, like all values that I've ever seen. Like I want to like just see them for the same session, for the full customer journey. So for me, like the biggest advantage of attribution is always to have different attribution models side by side and just play around with them and just be like, yeah, if I would assume another attribution for this, what would actually change? Because like having one view on your attribution and your success metrics is cool to start with, but once you actually see 5 different methods like side by side with each other, you actually start to understand, all right, if we would look at this differently, like your marketing attribution, for example, if you don't look at last click but first click, then suddenly all of your display advertisement would probably be a lot more valuable than it is today, because display is more of a like initial touch channel than a last touch channel. So customer journey analytics, just because it's like so flexible with attribution, and you can just bring all of your data sets in there and then use attribution across all of them. You can actually be like, yeah, like which marketing channel is driving like how many call center calls, because it's, if you put in the work, it's all connected. So that's super cool and something where customer